Hello, Andrew Colsky with Stop My OCD. And today we're here with Sina Tadayon, who is going to tell us about his story of dealing with OCD throughout his lifetime. It's a very interesting story, and I'm excited for you all to be able to hear it. So let me ask Sina if you can just introduce yourself to the audience. That would help us know a little bit about who you are.
Of course, my name is Sina Tadyon. I'm originally from Northern Virginia. I currently live in Los Angeles. I'm an actor, a writer, and hopefully an advocate for OCD and other anxiety-related disorders.
Great, great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us and share your story because there's so many people out there who are struggling. Maybe they don't even realize they have OCD or they suspect they might have OCD, but they don't know what that means. So I'm really excited to be able to get into your story further today. So, so why don't we start off like this? Take us back to as far back as you can remember when you first noticed that there was something that seemed like maybe it was different than other kids.
Right. That's good. I feel like a lot of times for people with OCD, when you ask them that question, they know a particular sense of time of when it happened. But for me, I remember exactly the day. Like I could paint the picture for you. So basically I was in fourth grade, and it was like, I remember it was like a foggy morning, and I was on the school bus, and the older kids on the school bus were talking about the Dark Knight movie with Heath Ledger that just came out. And what they were saying that Heath Ledger killed himself because he couldn't get the image of the Joker out of his mind. And for the rest of the day, I just remember pacing around the playground, going in and out of the bathroom, trying to throw up because for some reason I couldn't get the image of the Joker out of my mind. And for the next about 3, 4 months, I really couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I kept going into my parents. I have this bad thought. I have this stuck in my mind. I didn't know what to do. And that was kind of the beginning of what happened to be a long, long journey with my OCD. And what was interesting, it wasn't until a couple weeks ago that I learned that that specific kind of OCD, because I always remember, I was like, why do I have this stuck? This image is stuck in my mind. And I never knew why. And then I understood that like it was suicidal ideation OCD. Like the thought I had in my mind was that if I think of this character as much as per se he did, then I'd have to kill myself. So yeah, that was the first obsession I ever had, and then it just continued to morph and morph, and yeah, that was the first instance I ever had.
Wow, wow. So there's a question there that I want to ask then, which is, so you're a young kid. This thought comes up, and you haven't experienced anything like that before. You go and you share with your parents that you're having this type of thought. How did your parents react?
Unfortunately, my parents were from a third world country, and they're immigrants here, and they didn't have too much knowledge about what mental health was or how to treat it. And they didn't know. They really were just confused. They assumed that my dad would always say, you got a bad thought, it comes through one ear, take it out the other. And what's interesting is I feel like that's the opposite of how OCD works in the brain. The whole
Mhm.
point is that it gets in, it gets stuck, and it spins down and it can't get taken out. So I always became a little nervous about going to my dad with my obsessions because I didn't know what to say. But my mom, she was always there. She would always ask me, but I could tell she didn't know. And throughout the couple years where I was in elementary school, middle school, she started taking me to see therapists and stuff like that. But the thing with OCD is the themes can get so gruesome and embarrassing at times where I would go there, but I'd be so reluctant on saying what it was actually going on. I'd make up some story. So I'd never really figure it out. Um, but yeah, they would just, I'd sleep with my mom at night. And the only thing that would help is just having that sense of support there and sense of certainty because I didn't know what was going to happen with these thoughts in my mind next.
Hmm. So you share this with your parents. They don't have a real, solid understanding of what's happening. Did you share it with any other adults like teachers or anybody at school, or did you keep it inside? How did you handle it from there?
I kept it inside for the most part. I remember one time going to see the counselor in elementary school, and she didn't really understand. So what she did was she actually pulled up a picture of Heath Ledger's Joker, which now I think is probably a pretty good exposure. But at the time, I didn't really know, so it wasn't that good for me. But other than that, I really kept it inside. I really kept it inside, and I remember my parents would always say that I'd always pace around like a headless chicken, a big pacer. They'd be sitting at the dinner table, and I'd take a bite, and I'd walk around and I'd pace to try to kind of sort through the thoughts. I couldn't sit down. I thought if I sat down, they'd just take over, take control. I had to physically be moving. I had to be snapping my fingers. I had to be walking around the house. I had to figure out why. I was always trying to figure out why. What does this mean about me? What does this mean about that? Why? And I would just spiral. I would just spiral to the point where my OCD would become such pure OCD, where at times I wouldn't even need to like react with a compulsion to do things. It was just me spiraling down, and that would just anchor the thought deep rooted into my life.
Wow. Wow. So you have this very first experience with this first obsessive thought. You're not clear on what's going on. The people around you are not really clear either. How long did that thought last, and did it ever come to an end?
That particular thought or theme, I would say, lasted about 5 months. And then again, like OCD adapts to your environment. Like as we grow, I feel like humans, one of the most innate abilities that we have is the ability to adapt to things, right? Like it takes someone that has like a rich man that has everything in the world. You give him a Lamborghini, he's going to feel the same thing as you take a poor man and you give him a Honda, right? We adapt to our environment. So my OCD ended up adapting, and that same theme translated where from the Joker, for some reason, it went to Michael Jackson. When Michael Jackson passed away, I don't know why, but there was something about, I think again, it was the fact that Michael Jackson died, killed himself. So again, it was that same theme. And then for some reason, it would go to, I would just see random people, or I would just see random faces on the street, and my OCD would just latch onto their face. And I had this fear, I had this anxiety that I could never get the image or thought about that person in my mind. It was like everywhere I turned, a new face I would see. And for the next 2 weeks, that face would be in my head. So that's where it kind of adapted as I went through elementary school. And then kind of as I started to go through middle school, they started to get a little more darker. The themes started to get a little more, as people know, like classic themes such as harm, pedophilia, and stuff like that. That's kind of where it translated to next.
Hmm. Okay. So you've had, by this point, you've had a lot of experiences with different types of thoughts coming through, a lot of them related to faces and people and things like that. I'm assuming that, you said your mom had taken you to see several therapists, but you were reluctant to, fully open up. So by the time you get to middle school, had there been anything that anyone had said or done that had provided any sort of relief yet, or it was still full blown,
It was still full blown. Yeah, I wouldn't say there was anything. I think anything I figured out that would gave me any sense of comfort came from me enacting compulsions, or me spiraling down and thinking on my own and thinking of like words to say that would like banish the OCD for it, but no, nothing external, in order to diminish it, unfortunately.
Right, right. Okay. So now you get into middle school, and you said some of the themes were becoming a little bit darker for you.
Yeah,
You still had not identified it as OCD yet, right?
no.
Okay. So as you're having these more difficult type of thoughts, what did you do?
It really became, I mean, like the nuances in terms of how I reacted were the same. How I felt was much worse, because again, I feel like OCD attacks the things that you value the most morally, and it makes you the antagonist of that narrative, which to me is the epitome of a hell,
Mhm.
right? the idea that the things you love the most, you are the villain in the story. I feel like that's worse than anything else. And yeah, basically my thoughts, because you're getting into middle school and sex starts becoming a new thing and you're in sex ed classes, stuff like that. I remember being in a sex ed class and they're showing a video about like stupid video about like how an uncle touched something stupid, and then boom, pedophilia OCD came, and it came in strong, and it was just I just remember everything I would do in life. I look back at pictures right now that I have with me in photo albums, and I can see my face in every single one of those pictures, and I can tell you exactly what intrusive thought was going through my head at that time.
Wow.
Exactly. Exactly. That's how much of a hook it had on my reality. That's how real it was to my life. That's how so much of a thought it wasn't. It was life to me, you know? But yeah, I mean, again, like a lot of these core theme pedophilia, harm, OCDs, they were just detrimental to my life. They're just like, it was literally like a living hell. Like I just couldn't get them out of my head. And like the nuances again, like that I enacted and the compulsions that I enacted because of them were the same, but they were full blown. The pedophilia OCD also translated to love harm OCD with my family member, because it was so weird because that period of time in middle school, I was also figuring out who I was in terms of my family background and who I was according to them. So there was a lot of family related thoughts, whether it was pedophilia thoughts, incestuous thoughts, harm thoughts. A lot of it was related to my family during that time. And what doesn't help is you practically see your family every day at that time. So there was really no escape. I mean, the only escape was when there was another obsession, you know. And what's interesting is when you have another obsession, the obsession before is like nothing. It's like what the hell was that? Like that was so funny that I even thought about that, which is so interesting to me. But yeah, that was middle school in a nutshell.
So then tell us this. You've got all of these thoughts going on in your head throughout middle school, and they're pretty heavy types of thoughts. And I'm sure that internally for yourself, there's probably some degree of judgment or shame,
Right.
things like that. What what did it, for an outsider, for other people in your class, how did you appear to them? Would they have had any idea that any of this was going on inside?
None whatsoever. None. None. None whatsoever. And that carried throughout, I mean, for all time. Still, when people I talk to about it, none. None whatsoever. I mean, there are times where I might perceive I'm doing things that are the worst things in the world, and that they're watching, me knock on wood, or me doing this. They think I'm like but none whatsoever. My closest friends, I tell them after a period of time, nothing. They don't.
So yeah, that was going to be my next question. So your closest friends or your best friends, did, did you ever share with them specifically what was going on?
Not until like a year or two ago, but during that time, no. And what's interesting is I feel like as people got to know me, there were certain things I would do characteristic wise, like be asking for reassurance on things, but obviously, like, they weren't in a position to know why, or like that it was a compulsion. They just thought, that's a characteristic. He likes to double check,
Mhm.
you know, like he likes to know, he likes to make sure everything is in order, right? He likes to, stuff like that. But they just attributed it to my characteristic. Like there was never even like seen as OCD as like a joke, as like a surface level thought about what OCD is. Oh, like he has nothing like even compared. Because it just intertwined into my character for a lot of people.
Wow. So, because you're still relatively young at this case and you're still learning about people and life and all the lessons to be learned yet, did you have any sense for yourself that either, oh, everybody else must have these same types of thoughts too? Or did you think, wow, nobody else has this and I'm different from them?
Oh, I thought I was one in the world. I thought I was insane. I thought I was schizophrenic, and I didn't have really knowledge about what schizophrenia it was, but I knew it was a pretty detrimental mental health disorder. So I assumed, because of how crippling this was, it's got to be the worst one. Like, they can't be worse than this. But no, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only one. I didn't even know there was a thing, what this was called. I just thought I was crazy. I thought it was different.
And did that have any particular impact on you in terms of, feeling lonely or feeling different, or, what were you thinking about yourself?
You know what's interesting is, at the time when I had those thoughts, none of the thoughts translated to how I would feel in the moment. Like, I would just go about my day. A lot of the thoughts were like, what if I have this and I'm in, like, something like a future reference? What if I have this and I'm in college? What if I have this when I have a wife, when I have a kid? What if I have this? That's where the fear was lined up. Like, it was like, for me, it was like, okay, I kind of can go about breathing and eating and living with these thoughts, of as hellish as it was. But what's going to happen when I have to take care of other people? What's going to happen when I have a kid, when I have a wife? And that's what feared me.
Mhm.
That's what I would always go back to.
Wow. So in terms of, impact on your studies, on your grades, on your test scores, things like that, was there any negative impact to that from your OCD, or did you pretty much manage that?
Um, I got by. I got by. I've never been someone that's been super, like, I'd say B student,
Mhm.
like nothing, like C, B student, sometimes D. I never really cared about school. I
Mhm.
saw school as a means of my day to day, not as something I was engaged in, something that I sought after. So, I mean, obviously there were times where my OCB would be so bad where I might not get to an assignment or might not do it, but regardless, I didn't really care like
Right.
that much. I cared more about, like, I mean, because at the end of the day, like, these thoughts make you think like you're in this, like, eye of a hurricane. Like, the worst thing that could possibly ever happen to you, to your character at that time, you're in the middle. It's your fault. And when that weight is on your shoulders, really nothing else matters. Like that, like, that's it. Like, that's the epitome of your world and your life, is figure out that problem. Why am I at the center? Am I really at the center? What does this mean? Everything else is whatever,
Right.
you know.
Wow. So you make it through middle school, you get into high school. At the time you got into high school, did any of the middle school thoughts carry over? Did things start to change to something different? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so high school, I'd say there were like periods of time, right, during high school where there were, at least I thought, right, breaks, like breaths of fresh air. And for, like, I guess that's just because there was nothing to really spark the OCD. But then there were times, like when I was in high school, there was a long period of time where there were multiple school shootings in the country, and that really struck me. That really struck a bad nerve in my OCD, and I really started obsessing about that, and it's so crazy because like, they would, like, I remember having like, school shooting intrusive thought when the Sandy Hook shooting first happened when I was in sixth grade. And the thoughts were so ridiculous. It's like, what if I love the shooter? What if I like them? What if, like, what if they're a nice, stupid, stupid stuff. And then it would go a couple years, and I think, like, during those couple years, that was ridiculous that I had a thought like that. And another school shooting would happen again, and I'd be 5 years later, I'd be a junior in high school, and I'd be and then be in the bathroom trying to throw up and, like, trying, like, crying, like, what's going on? The same thought. I believe, like, you can be 13 and you could be 33. You could be 5 and you could be 55, or whatever. And that thought is still going to affect you the same, because I feel like I talked about this in my paper, that we have, like, in a sense, two brains, right? We have a regular brain that grows, adapts, it goes through lessons, it learns, and it can continue on to life based on what it has learned and how it has grown. And then we have an OCD brain, that stays the same, right? Doesn't
Mhm.
learn, doesn't grow, doesn't take from new experiences, can't build off anything. It's just there, and when something triggers it or whatever you might want to say, we just lean into that OCD brain and it just comes back and it becomes our regular brain, if that makes sense. And that kind of what was a lot going on through middle school, high school, and all these really dark, intrusive thought themes between harm and stuff like that. But I guess to finish off high school, the one that caused me to really go seek help was, it was the summer before college, and I was going to college in San Diego and living in Virginia. I didn't really know anyone going there. There was a lot of anxiety. I mean, just as any college kid, right? I mean, it's in like, I feel like all anxiety is uncertainty. And I feel like that period of time for a lot of young kids is a huge period of uncertainty. What's going to happen? Who am I going to be? You're at the most pivotal point in your life, figuring out who you are as a young person. And I started having sexual orientation OCD at that time.
Mhm.
And because of everything going on in my life, it was probably one of the most challenging themes I've had to face, because I feel like it really attacks you at your core in a period of your life where you're supposed to know who you are as a person and going. So it was very hard for me at that time. It was, yeah, I started having panic attacks. I never knew what panic attacks felt like before, but I started having a lot of those. And then I finally went and saw a therapist. And I was open, I was truthful. And within one session, they diagnosed me with OCD. And like, my whole life changed just from a simple diagnosis, right? I was able to finally label what this thing that was controlling my life was. Like, it changed my entire life, my entire life. Just knowing what it is more than half the battle, in my opinion. You know, that's why I think it's so important with things that you're doing, just to get the word out, get the message out, because it's more than half the battle, just knowing what it is.
Right.
So,
Well, so when this therapist said to you OCD, the very first time you heard it, did you have any idea what that meant?
I was like, oh, I guess she thinks I'm hyper, or something that's hyper organized and likes to clean and stuff like that. And yeah, nothing really, until I started looking into it. I had no idea.
Wow. Wow. So once you get this diagnosis and you start looking into it, and I'm assuming it's starting to kind of come together for you, um, were you able to explain that to your parents? Like, how did they react at that particular point?
Oh, my mom went gung ho. She started reading books, learning about OCD. She was on her own wave of learning about what it was. Excuse me. Um, and I was, I just kind of went down. I like loved learning about it. I loved reading something in a book and pinpointing it to a random theme or a random obsession I had 10 years prior. It felt, it was like a revelation to me. It was insane. Yeah, both my parents, they just, all respect and power to them. They finally, had an opportunity to figure out what it was and help their kid, and they started learning about it as much as I did.
Mhm.
And yeah, they would send me things, send me articles. To this day, they send me videos, like stuff like that, which is it's really sweet. But yeah,
So this particular therapist that first diagnosed you, that was in Virginia?
Virginia. Yeah, I still talk to her to this day every now and then.
Great, great. But I'm assuming that shortly after getting that diagnosis, you were preparing to go off to California for
Right.
college. I'm curious, you get this diagnosis, it all starts to make sense. What
Right.
happened from there?
Yeah, so it was interesting, because after I get the diagnosis, things obviously, like the diagnosis, it helps, but it's not like the all-encompassing cure to everything, right? You still face it, and especially if it's new, there's every like little crook and cranny of OCD you have to figure out. But one thing that really helped, one thing that was probably still to this day, is she said, if you have an inclination that it's OCD, if you have the smallest smell, the littlest taste that it's OCD, it is. You label it as OCD and you move on, right? That to me was a godsend. That was the tool that I used throughout the summer the most in order to get by and focus on. But what's interesting though is my freshman year of college going in was the period in my life, one of the period of my lives where OCD was at its lowest. I had just came into this new environment. I was meeting all these people, this new experiences, everything was new. I joined a fraternity, I had a day-to-day task, I had a routine, I had things to do. There's no time for my OCD to come up. I was busy. And I was busy doing things I liked doing, meeting new people in an environment that I loved, that I felt that I was flourishing, So my OCD was very, very quiet throughout that year. Um, yeah, it was almost non-existent
Wow.
that first freshman year.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So so then I'm assuming during your freshman year you were not seeing a counselor or anybody else in California?
There were times, no, I wasn't seeing. There were times where I'd get on the phone with my therapist from Virginia, just to catch up, stuff like that. Um, but for the most part, things were good. And I have a problem where when things are good, I lay off the gas in terms of like therapy and in terms of medication, which has been a reoccurring theme. But yeah, no, I check in on her every now and then my freshman year.
So it sounds like your freshman year went well. You finally had, a name that you could put to this thing that was causing these thoughts. You were doing your own research and learning more about it. So did OCD come back again?
Yeah, so after my freshman year, which I kind of went home. It's so funny. Second semester of freshman year, after everything was over, I went home, and the second I landed home, the obsession started again. These
Mm.
random obsessions about things like that were going on in college, about new relationships I'd made, but it just came out of nowhere. The second was home when I flew back to Virginia. And I think it was just from a lack of purpose, really. I was just, like whatever purpose I may have had in college, there was something I could have pointed to as a purpose, right? However little it may have been, there was something. But when I went back home, I didn't feel that. I feel like I was loitering. I was just there. And I stayed in Virginia for about 14 days, and the obsessions got so bad that I just said, I have to go back to California. I have to. I thought going back to California was the cure. So I went back during the summer, and I went back to Orange County, not San Diego, which was pretty distant from San Diego, but I thought at least I'd be there. At least I'd have more things there, which was a mistake because there was also no one for me in Orange County at the time. So I was also just, I was alone. I was doing my own things. But at the same time, I again like didn't really have like a circle, anything to really distract me. So the thoughts came and came and came. Same type of themes every now and then. And then I had a lot of sensory motor OCD with swallowing, where like I couldn't stop swallowing, which was a pain. But then I'm sorry, what was I trying to get to? Oh yeah. Then I started getting really fixated on working out, getting in shape, getting ready for the year. I had to make sure everything was perfect for the time I set back on campus for what in my mind, oh, it's gonna be such a great year. I get back on campus and things are good. Things are all right the first couple months. And then a situation happened somewhere on campus where there was someone that was accused of sexual assault. And on top of that, some things happened with our Greek community, which kind of fell through. So everything that I had forethought about being structured and having some sense of certainty for that year completely fell apart. And I just spiraled. I just started having a lot of themes in accordance to sexual assault OCD. Like for about a year, I wouldn't go on dates with girls. I couldn't talk to girls, approach the girls at parties because I didn't ever want to come across as being someone that would be thought in that light, right? And what's interesting though is that when I started thinking about that, I was like, okay, OCD it's never really about how I feel about myself. It's about how I think other people will perceive me for every thought, sexual orientation thought, for the harm OCD thoughts. It was always about, will this person perceive me as someone who would do something like that? That's how the thoughts went about. It was never like, I feel bad about thinking, like this, because at the sense, I knew I felt bad about it. I knew I didn't like it. It was at the core of my thoughts, but it was my main concern was when people would make like people make stupid remarks, like here and there, like I wouldn't when I had harm OCD, I would never listen to songs where they talk about hurting people. I never listened to NPR. I never played video games where there are guns because I didn't want people to see me playing those games or listen to those things and think I would ever be remotely considered as someone related to something in the field of those harm OCD. So yeah, that was a pretty rough period my sophomore year. It was just flooded with those thoughts, and I didn't really have. I became very interested in the Greek community at my school. It gave me like a sense of purpose, which is, again, some people might take this in their own light, but if I like to say, what's really interesting about Greek life that people don't see is people come into college, right? Like I said, at a very vulnerable point in their lives. And what young people want most, what people want most in general, is to belong, find a place where they feel supported. When people enter college, a lot of times, at least in my school, there wasn't that support from school. That support came from a Greek system. And I'm not saying Greek life is this like all encompassing thing that's all good, nor is it all bad. I feel like that's where the mistake comes in, is painting it with one color brush, right? I had some of the best times of my life, met some of the best friends for life that I've had there, but I've also had some of the worst times of my life. I had the worst obsessions there, I feel like it's all about, I feel like there's a correct way to go about it and a wrong way to go about it, and it all depends on the way you go about it. But that being said, at the time, it gave me a sense of purpose, right? It gave me something to do, something to be a part of, something to strive for. And towards the end of my sophomore year, I guess what's kind of funny is a lot of my fraternity brothers saw the obsession, quote unquote, I had for the fraternity, how I cared about its well-being and it doing well. They nominated me to run for president at the time, and I was something I was a bit uncertain on. I was still struggling with these thoughts, but I did it. And that next year, when I was doing that, again, was another period of my life where my OCD was the lowest. I had anxiety. I had a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of stress, but it rarely translated into OCD,
Wow.
which was interesting because
Yeah.
I felt I had purpose in my life. I was leading this organization. There was 150 people that I felt I was responsible for, that in a sense looked up to me, respected me. I had to carry myself in a certain light. There were things I had to do in my day-to-day that kept me busy. I was dealing with all kinds of people, all facets of life. For some points in time, I had to be a therapist for some individuals. People would come up to me and, with their darkest problems, be open with me. Young guys, young kids, people struggling with suicide, there was no time for my OCD. There's no time for it. And now I think about it, I don't know if the word is time, not to say that there is no time for my OCD. I think more so is just, I personally believe like that when I had purpose and when I had meaning in my life, and where like I was encountering every day struggles that were separate from things going on in my mental, that was the cure, right? That was the cure to me, when I had an all-encompassing purpose in my life, and that's what that provided.
Wow.
Sorry
So
for going on a little rant. That was a little rant, I feel like.
no, but it's very helpful to understand the picture, because what I'm understanding right now is, so you kind of get to college and things go pretty well the first year, and then you get to this point where things start to go back towards the OCD realm, and you have all these thoughts and concerns and all. Then, so it's kind of like the seesaw. Then you get involved with the fraternity more, and because of all that, for whatever reason, the OCD starts to dissipate again. So, as you're now continuing through college, was was that sort of the pattern that would kind of come and go and come and go and come and go? And where did it end up by the end of college?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, all right. So once I finished being president, um, the thoughts and the upset. As I stopped being president, I was in a relationship, and that relationship had fallen through. I was on a career path. That career path had fallen through. So kind of coincidentally, at the perfect time I stopped being president, a lot of things that brought certainty to my life, that brought meaning to my life, like a relationship that brought meaning in that sense, a career goal that brought meaning in that sense, and a position that was true to my character that brought meaning. And that's all fell through. Like they just didn't exist anymore.
Mhm.
And I found myself chasing my tail, running in a circle. Like I couldn't, I was gripping on to hairs of the past, right? And that went on for the first couple months through my first semester. And things got so bad, anxiety wise and OCD wise, with me just still holding on, trying to hold on to things in my past, right? Where there was a morning where I just started having these panic attacks again. Every morning I was having these panic attacks. I couldn't eat. I was trying to throw up in the morning. I was throwing up my lungs in the morning. And it got so bad to the point where I was talking to my parents on the phone, and they're like, you need to come home. You need to come home. And I didn't resist. I just didn't. I was just floating. I was just floating. So I came home, and for the next couple of weeks, I was attaching these little electrodes to my head to stimulate my temples or whatever it may be. I was meeting with a therapist twice a week, a psychiatric doctor once a week. I was taking all these medication, and I was just like fix. What's gonna work? Something's gotta hit. But ultimately, what also ended up happening when I went home is that my life got a little less complex.
Mhm.
I was able to narrow it down. Every morning I'd just wake up, I'd eat right, I'd go on walks, I'd go on the gym, I'd watch a movie with my dad. That's it. Every day for 10 days, every day. Then my life started to simplify. And then one night when I hit my head on the pillow, I had this dream, this very vivid dream where I was wearing this green tux, like green velvet, and these nice brown suede shoes, and I had a little golden man in my hand, right? And then I woke up from that dream, and the next day, I swear to you, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Any sense of depression, any sense of anxiety, any sense of OCD was gone, like that, like instantly gone, instantly. Throughout my childhood, I would always want to be an actor since I was a kid. Like you talked to my physical doctor, my physician, when I was a kid, and my pediatric doctor. Sorry, I had to get that right. And then every time they asked on the physical, it'd be like actor, 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 actor. And before I went to college, just because I thought my parents wouldn't support me going 3,000 miles away and doing acting, I became business and then got involved with a fraternity, kind of faded away. And then I came back, and I knew exactly what I had to do. What the tunnel where I could see 3 feet in front of me, I could now see 3 miles, 300 miles. I had a sense of purpose. I had meaning. There was no more fear of leaving college. I was excited to leave college. I was excited for what's next. And from then on out to this day, every single decision I've made is towards that goal. And I've created, try to create like plans and nuances. And this is where my OCD at times I feel like can become a superpower, because I use my organization and my passion and obsession for that goal, to create this life I want to live in my head. But the problem is that if that obsession takes a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, and you fall off that line just a little bit, it becomes very detrimental, because you start reacting in irrational ways with irrational compulsions that don't make sense based on the weight of that thought, which is the problem. But I mean, some people can say, well, hey, if you really want to get that done, it's maybe not a bad thing that you get tossed in a little hellhole for a little bit to make sure you get it done. But then, yeah, ever since then, ever since I moved, or ever since I had that thought, I kind of revolved everything in my life to that goal.
Wow. So there there's a lot there.
Yeah.
I do want to go back for 1 second.
Yeah.
You came back to Virginia. You described that you started trying all these different types of therapies, cures, things like that. You tried medication. You were describing all these things. Um, One of the things, did you try transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS?
I believe so. Is that what is that exactly?
Well, that would be probably maybe alpha stim or something. It's a small, was it like a small little box that you held in your hands and it tied to electrodes?
Yes, and you wet the con pads and you put them on your thing. Yeah, that's what it
Might have
was.
been alpha stim. So through all of those things, was there anything in particular that stood out to you that you think helped the most, or was it just sort of a combination of things, or maybe you don't even know?
I honestly think it's been talk therapy. I think talk therapy is the best sense of it because you're just in a sense of it's like what's in your head is a ball of yarn. And through talk therapy, you just, you know, stringing it out, seeing it for what it is. Yeah, so I'd say talk therapy more than anything. And that's not to discourage the other methods. I believe they did help. But what I noticed personally, where I felt the most immediate benefit was talk therapy.
Mhm. Okay. And was any of that talk therapy exposure and response prevention?
Um, there was after there was a expose. Obviously, would do little exposures here and there because a lot of my exposures at that time were revolved around reassurance. So there was a lot of reassurance exposures, just to not like not seek reassurance, not seek reassurance, and a lot of pure OCD. It's just to not like go down that rabbit hole. But there was some, but it was mainly CBT and talk therapy. It wasn't until a few months later where I started getting more involved in some exposure response therapy again.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I just wanted to get some clarification on that. So you go through all of that. You're doing a lot of work on trying to kind of get things together for yourself. So once you kind of get through that phase, does that bring us to where you are today, or was there something else that happened in between?
Um, so I would say I went back to school and I felt good. I knew what I had to do. Then I would say the next semester, I've always had a hyperfixation on my nose ever since I was a kid. And there was a point in my life where I always knew I wanted to get a rhinoplasty done. I wanted to get it fixed. I mean, to me, this is probably the newest large obsession that I've had, um, alongside another one, but it's still like that summer, I was like, I have to get rhinoplasty. To me, it was like a new phase. Like once by doing that, I'd truly be entering a new phase. I'd be doing that. I'd be moving to Los Angeles, really moving into like a new phase of my life. So I had to do it. Obviously, so there were some up and downs of before I did it, but I eventually ended up doing it. That next summer after my senior year. And yeah, I really became hyperfixated on my nose for that summer. I uh I would eat everything out of a straw. I wouldn't go outside for the next months. And it wasn't until I moved to LA officially and waited a couple months after where it started to die down. Um, so this now where I'm kind of drawing you through was last year around like the same time, like about a year ago now.
Mhm.
So yeah, I started getting hyper fixated on them. I started like checking or taking pictures all the time. Did anything change? Did me going in the heat for this amount of time, did it make it melt? Did it make it look different? These ridiculous thoughts. Um, and I was doing talk therapy, and there were some exposures that my therapist, same one from Virginia, was trying to put me through, and um, yeah, it was a hell. But I guess after that, I mean, it's so interesting. The only thing that's really healed that is I guess I've been exposing myself day and day throughout it, but it's time, really, through time. It become more comfortable doing certain exposures and doing that. And now really, obviously there's some reminiscence there, but it's not really a big deal. But I guess another thing after that is I moved to LA and I was like, okay, excuse me, how do I make this idea, this dream I have a reality? So I became super hyper obsessive on that, but not in a bad way. This is where it's, you know, um, I started like every single thing I do, my routines, everything was to get towards that goal, get towards that goal. One thing I found is like, for example, I'd go to acting classes, um, and someone would be smoking a cigarette in a scene in class. And I'd leave the room because my OCD would think that because I inhaled that cigarette, because I smelled that smoke, it's going to be bad for my face, bad for my skin. If my skin and face don't look good, then I'm not as appealing as an actor. If I'm not as appealing as an actor, then I'm not going to be as successful as an actor, just spiraling down that hole. And that happened at times. And there's been still things related to that. All my obsessions now are related to my career and achieving that goal, which again is very like hard because I'm striving on that line, and the little thing that takes it left to right. It's a hard place because I don't mind it at times. I really don't mind it. I do get angry and I don't like that feeling for a little bit, but I don't mind it because I'm so hyper fixated on and gung-ho on this one dream, this one thing that's brought so much meaning and purpose to my life that that's what I want. That's like, even if I have to suffer from OCD for a little bit, as long as it keeps me in track, I don't really mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. So you've had a really long, lifelong
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
Um, I just the number of different types of OCD that you have experienced over time is a long laundry
Yeah.
list.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's just incredible to hear your whole story. So as we sit here today, doing this podcast here, how would you describe to the audience, how are you doing today?
That was a good question because I really just wanted to talk about that. So, a few months back, I had a scenario where I went back to Virginia and I got food poisoning and I was just bed rest for days and days. And I really shot at my routine, and my OCD was my routine in my mind is a sense of certainty that I bring to my life. My OCD, my anxiety spiral from a sense of uncertainty. So when I have that routine, it's the only combatant and that I see in my mind to combat that. When I went home, there were some family issues, some things that went on, and it really put me in a really dark place again for a brief moment of time where I was highly, I was having panic attacks and like it just out of nowhere. And I don't know if it was just because I went back home and I was having like thoughts like it just the weight of being in that room back home, I don't know what it was. But then I came back to Los Angeles and I kind of felt like I was for the past couple of months, I've been on a new wave, whatever you may call it. I've read a couple of these books and listened to some podcasts, and I kind of came to this conclusion, right? Where it was like, I really started to lean into failure, into things that every day where I'd fail purposefully, things that would discomfort me, whether it's like a couple extra seconds in the shower or whatever. But what I did was I signed up for this marathon. I read this book where this David Goggins, he's this guy that he did an ultra marathon with only a couple of days training. I was like, all right, maybe I won't do an ultra marathon yet, but I'll try a regular marathon and I'll give myself a week to train. And that week where I was training for that marathon was the happiest week of my life. I had a tangible goal where I saw it. I knew exactly what I had to do to get to that goal, right? And I was putting myself in a position where every day I was failing, I was learning, and I was growing every single day. And it made me so happy. It provided me such a sense of purpose and fulfillment. And then I did that. And every now and every day since then, it's like, okay, what more can I do to grow? And I believe in order to grow, you must fall. And in order like to learn, you must fall to learn to grow. So if you don't fall, you can't learn. If you can't learn, you can't grow. That's why I go back to that first year when I was in college and everything was so new to me. But I felt like I gained so much and felt so purposeful because every second I was there in that new environment, I was falling. Because I was learning every second I was falling, and so I was always growing. So my OCD didn't have any room there. Because when you put yourself in these positions of struggle, you're constantly learning and like falling and learning and growing over and over and over again. that it really just builds callous on you and you really become the best version of yourself. So these little physical nuances that I've been putting myself through have really translated to mental help in terms of my OCD, where it's like if I can tangibly do these things where it's kind of like exposure response therapy, but physically. So when I put myself in my body in these physical situations to struggle, then in turn my mind kind of adapts to that, and it becomes easier for me to go about my OCD and expose myself to my thoughts and go about that in that type of realm. So now I've been really playing with that, and now I'm training for an ultra marathon, a 50-mile marathon on December 2nd, and
Oh,
I I felt, yeah, and to be honest with you, like one thing that last obsession I had was I just feel very thankful and like grateful to like be able to do this, like be able to talk to you about this thing I'm passionate about, be able to have the opportunity to chase my dreams, because it's like I'm very fortunate to do that. Like in like every day, like I think like there's so many people that can't, so many people that aren't in that position. But yeah, that's it. Last thing, I think that's where I am now, I'd say. Yeah.
that's a you're a great inspiration to others because earlier, like I remember you were talking about being president of the fraternity and how people had picked you for that because you were so focused on getting things right and so hyper, focused on things. And to go from that sort of this need for perfection and then move over to where you are now, which is sort of the need for falling to be
Yeah.
able to learn and get yourself back up,
Right.
didactic to each other.
Right. Right.
But that's really wonderful to hear. Um, so in the interest of time here and to kind of wrap us up, for someone who is watching this video and learning about your situation and maybe that some of it is resonating with them, maybe they're seeing some similarities for themselves. If you had to offer any sort of advice to them, what would your most important advice be?
Education. Education, education, education. Knowledge. Learn. What is it? Learn. Go to the exact parts of the brain where it's affected. Learn about it. Don't let it have power over you. The more knowledge you have about it, the more power you have in response to your OCD. That's what I'd say. Education, education, education.
Yeah, that's
And
wonderful.
focus.
That's you know that's one of the good things now about the fact that we have the internet and the ability for people to look up and find things. Pre-internet, it was really hard for people to find information, but now it's a matter of sifting through all the information that's available.
Right.
But that's wonderful. So I can't thank you enough for taking your time and being willing to share such a personal story with us to really get a good sense of how this goes about. And for people who are first discovering that there's something going on and they don't know what it is yet and they haven't put a label to it yet, and the distress that they feel, and family members who maybe don't know how to help them because they just don't know what's happening. But to be able to take it from there and move to where you are now is comforting to know that can occur. So um
Right.
I wish you the greatest of success in your acting career.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity and the platform to be able to speak my thoughts and raise awareness. Because at the end of the day, like this is, I mean, I mean, I think, and if there's just one guy out there, one little kid out there that could save the years and years and years of struggle just by understanding what it is or listening to this or bringing some type of awareness to the platform, that you change someone's life. Truly, truly you change their life. So I thank you and commend you so much on what you're doing and what you've done so far. And I truly believe it. Yeah, yeah,
Well,
it's
I
amazing.
I'm sitting here thinking to myself, uh, what like justice would come to you if you got to play the part of the Joker,
You know
future.
what's crazy? I have a actually tattoo on my thigh. I don't know if you can see it.
You can't see, it's too low.
Okay. Whatever. Well, I got a tattoo. I have the tattoo. I have a tattoo of the Joker on my thigh as a little full circle moment. But yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I look forward to, seeing you in a movie on the big screen one day, and I'll be able to say, hey, I know that guy.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Means a lot.
So, all right. Well, thank you for your time. And maybe we'll be able to talk further and you'll give us an update on how your career is going.
Of course. Of course.
All right.